Hi, my name is Palmy, and my husband's name is Kevin. He was diagnosed with a life-ending diagnosis 25 years ago, and this is our documentation on how we handle day-to-day life and life challenges that we deal with. We have a podcast called When Life Gives You Lemons. We would love for you to check that out. And this is the complimentary video documentation.
Hey guys, hey, we're gonna make sourdough today. So what I'm doing here is you do everything by measurements, by grams, and so I'm measuring everything out. I have already measured out my sourdough starter. I'm gonna make 2 loaves today. You'll see me making the first one here, and then in a little while later we'll start with the sourdough again to make a second loaf. I'm gonna make sugar-free cinnamon raisin that I'm going to give to my mother-in-law when we go on our trip. So here I'm mixing together the water and the sourdough starter. I always do this together because I think it gets a better mix and gets your sourdough starter started quickly into the bread. So it's 350 grams of warm to the touch filtered water. We have a water softener or conditioner onto our water, so I don't need to buy softener. I get it right from our tap. I'm going to do all 250 grams of all-purpose flour, and the recipe you'll see calls for 500 grams of flour total, but I find I like the mix between the all-purpose flour and the bread flour. The bread flour is going to give you a little more texture and make it a little softer, and I like that in my bread. So I'm going ahead here and checking my recipe and adding in the amount of grams that I need for the all-purpose flour. It's important you're pretty accurate on the measurements here. And now I'm going to add the 250 grams of the bread flour. I buy my bread flour and my all-purpose organic unbleached flour from Thrive Market. It's the cheapest price I've found so far. I have priced it out at Azure Standards, buying a larger amount even, and it is not any cheaper. In fact, I think it was $1 more. And then Walmart is my other source here in Missouri, and it's really hard to find unbleached flour, for one, and two, the price does not beat Thrive Market, and I do the yearly subscription, so I even with that, it doesn't come in close. So I'm adding 4 grams of sea salt. Any salt you like is good here. I sometimes mix in between sea salt and the pink Himalayan salt. I also have a Hawaiian sea salt that I got a while back, and I sometimes add that to it. I don't find much difference. However, I do find that if you don't add enough salt, the bread does not taste right. So here I'm using my Dutch whisk. It's a typical tool you get when you're making sourdough. I attended a class for sourdough a couple months ago, and it was one of the free gifts that you got for coming to the class. I already have one, so I'm probably going to end up giving one to my daughter. She does sourdough. I gave her part of my starter a while back, and she hasn't started it yet, but eventually she will start making sourdough, and this will be very helpful for her. You're going to just pull it together. You don't really need to worry about how much it's mixed. Just make sure you don't see any dry flour on the bottom of your bowl. So it'll be pretty stiff. This is I think this is an 80% hydration dough, which just means how much water is compared to the flour. It is messy, messy, messy stuff. They say to be careful about rinsing sourdough down your drains, that it can plug up the drains, and I can believe it. This stuff sticks to everything. So I'm just mixing it together, kneading it a little bit until it looks like it's in a round circle. and I feel like it's mixed and doesn't see any dry flour on the bottom of the bowl. When you have a sticky dough like that, sometimes when if you put your hands in water, you can work with it and it won't stick to your hands as much. So that's our first dough. We're going to let it sit and hydrate for about 30 minutes. After it's hydrated, we'll go and start doing our first stretch and folds. You'll do 3 of them. I put a top on it and set it off onto the oven where it's a nice warm spot for me. Okay, we're on to the second batch. Got another bowl here. Get our scale out. We're going to measure it, make sure it's zeroed out. And we're going to add, the reason I'm doing 2 today is I needed to use up some sourdough starter. I had double fed it, and so I had like 200 grams of active starter, so I'm using it up. I use up almost all that's in my jar, and then I just add flour and water to it, and I've never had any issues. My starter is about probably 2 years old at this point. I'm scraping it all because I'm going to trade. I think this is where I go ahead and trade out to a new glass. It's getting kind of yucky on the sides and stuff. That black band you see on my jar, that shows me where the rise is from the previous night. I put that band around where the flour comes up to, and then I can see what the increase on the rise is in the next morning. I put mine on top of my refrigerator. I find that's the warmest spot in my kitchen, and I just close a cabinet around it so it doesn't get much draft. We keep our see, I'm trading out to a clean jar here, taking whatever's left. I'm going to make sure measure what the weight of my jar is, and I try to keep at least between 30 to 50 grams of starter in my jar. This is a bigger jar. I don't like to use this one. I like the more straight-sided ones, but this is what I had clean. I think I was sprouting seeds in the other jar that I use for the starter. So I'm getting out whatever's left in that jar, and then I'm going to see how much it measures, and I'm going to feed it. I do a 1-to-2 ratio. So that means if I have 25 grams of starter, I will add 50 grams of flour and 50 grams of water. And I don't warm my water for my starter. I just leave it whatever temperature it's at. I do set some out so it's not cold and it's about room temperature. Here I'm rinsing the jar. The jar will sit there for about 12 hours, and then I go ahead and put it, clean out as much as I can, and then go ahead and put it back in the refrigerator until I'm ready to do it again. Here you see I'm putting that band on there so I know if there's been any rising, how much it's rose. And this apparently I'm going to set back up for it to rise again before I put it in the refrigerator. So I put the cloth cap on it versus sealing it so that it can get some air. And again, I'm putting it on top of my refrigerator. So back to the loaf. So I've got my starter in there. And I'm going to add the water. This is where I set my water. This is just water from my sink or from my kitchen. I put it in a container. It's easier to fill my coffee maker with that because my coffee maker is on the far side. And then also I use it for my sourdough. I'm warming now. When I do make my sourdough, I do warm the water. When I make my loaves, I do warm the water to warm temperature, just so it feels warm on your hand. I'm waiting for the water to come out of the microwave now. And that starter is already in my bowl. Hydration. That's my new cup. It's a Yeti. It's 46 ounces. It's been instrumental in me getting my liquid in daily. So now my water is warm enough, and I go ahead and pour it into my sourdough starter. Mix it up like I did previously. You want to make sure it's all mixed. You see that little clingy stuff on the side? You don't want any of that on there. You want to mix it really well. Check my recipe again. I hang my recipe up on my my fan. It has a piece of metal, and I take a magnet and I set my recipe up there so I can see it. I'm adding my 250 grams of the all-purpose flour. The only difference in when I wouldn't mix the all-purpose and the bread flour together is if I'm making like a rye loaf or a whole wheat loaf, then I would take those 250 grams and I would use the alternate flour. I do tend to stick with the bread flour because I like the texture of it. So that's where I would get rid of the all-purpose and I'd add the rye or I'd add the whole wheat. See there, I'm showing you that's bread flour. Or that's the all-purpose. This is the bread flour I'm putting in now, 250 grams. Again, it's very important that you get the accurate amount in there. I must be close because I'm just sprinkling. I'm tearing it out so it goes to 0 again, and I'm going to add my salt. I have a little salt well that I really like. My husband got it for me for Christmas or birthday or something one year. I really like it. It has 2 sections. You can put 2 different. All I put in there is salt. I don't put anything like pepper or any other seasonings. Here I'm mixing it up with my Dutch whisk, bread whisk. See, I'm getting all that dried flour off the sides there. So once this is done, again, we're going to set it aside and we'll wait 30 minutes for it to hydrate the flour, the water to hydrate the flour in there. And then we'll start our stretch and folds every 30 minutes, 3 stretch and folds. See, I'm putting water on my hands so it doesn't stick to my hands so much. I can get a couple of stretch and folds in there to get it together. I just want it shaped into a little ball so it's easier to manage once I start stretch and folding. There you go, you can see the texture. So you may wonder why I do make, I think I've told you this in previous recordings, but I had a gastric sleeve, and only bread that I can eat without having caused me some gastral issues is the sourdough. But I do limit myself to the sourdough. It's usually half or a fourth of a piece every other day or so. I have to. You will gain weight if you eat your sourdough all the time. But I cut it in fourths and pull out a fourth for my husband, or in this case, I'm going to give one to my in-laws for when we see them. I'm going to stick it in the freezer and then give it to them when we go down there in a couple of weeks. So here's my first stretch and fold for the first batter. You're just pulling it up. You'll do all four. You'll go pull it up, stretch 4 ways. This is my bench scraper. It will get all the bread or the dough off the sides of the bowl. And it's easier to manage sometimes with that dough scraper. See, I'm stretching, folding here. Basically, you do 4 around the bowl, a complete round. I sometimes do a little more. Like here, I'm taking it up and actually really twisting it. And what you're trying to do here is you're trying to develop gluten. See how much more smooth it is from when we first started just a minute ago. You don't have to do it for very long. Stretch and folds are just a quick 1 minute hands-on type thing for the dough, but you will do it. You'll wait half an hour to 45 minutes, and this is not, you don't have to be so strict about this. If you forget and you do it for an hour, forget it for an hour, then you just do it in an hour. What you're trying to do is build gluten here. See how you can see it was all messy and they call it shaggy. They call the dough shaggy is how you want to pull it together in the very first, and then once you start the stretch and fold, you'll see it gets more and more smooth, and that's what you're building that gluten in there, which is the texture you want for your increases the texture you want for your bread. So that's stretch and fold number 1. Cover it and let it sit for another half an hour. This is stretch number 2. We're doing the same thing, but you can tell the difference. I'm getting my hands wet here. You can see the difference in the dough already. It's a lot smoother. It's stretchier. See, it's not clinging to itself as much as it did before. And you're just stretching, folding it 4 all the way around. And again, I do this extra. You can tell a lot by the texture of the feel of the bread. Again, cover it, let it sit for another half an hour. See, you can see the second dough is really, this is actually the first dough. I did it in a different order this time. But it's still the same thing. It looks more like dough versus the shaggy dough that we started with. And a lot better than the second time, or the first time we did the stretch and folds. My hand's getting sticky here, so I'm getting some water on my hands. I guess you could put a bowl off to the side and just dip your hands, but that would be too much sense for me. I mean, I have to clean another bowl. All right, we'll set this back. Again, that's the second stretch and fold. We'll see you in a few minutes, half an hour. Okay, stretch and fold number 3. We're doing the same thing. I'm starting with the second bowl, bread again. Getting my hands wet. See how much it has relaxed. That's what you're looking for. If you haven't worked with sourdough, and there I'm turning my light on, give you a little better, there you go. If you haven't worked with sourdough, it is so satisfying when you're started off with a mixture like this and you end up with a gorgeous bread. Even if it isn't gorgeous and it doesn't come out right, it still is very satisfying. I really like working with sourdough. And there's so many varieties that you can make. You can make cinnamon roll out of the discard or even out of the regular dough. Typically, cinnamon rolls or rolls or anything like that, they add a little more they add milk. It's not such a basic recipe as this one. So that's our second loaf there that we just completed our third stretch and fold on. See, that looks good. So what we'll do now is we'll let it sit for between 2 to 3 hours, depending on how warm your kitchen is. Again, don't go by the time, you're going to go by the feel of your dough. And I'll show you what it should do when it's ready. It's bulk, or what we're doing now is going to be called a bulk ferment. And that's when the sourdough is eating up all the sugars and the carbs. That's the reason why it's easier on my stomach, is because there's not as many sugars or carbs in that bread after it's had time to bulk ferment. Okay, I'm just checking it, my recipe. Okay, so it is bulk fermented. I think this was about 2 to 3 hours. You don't want sourdough to double in size. Typically with bread, they'll say wait until your dough is doubled in size, but sourdough, you do not want it to double in size. About 3/4 of an increase is what you're looking at. You're going to poke the dough, and if it's kind of like a doughboy, a Pillsbury doughboy, where they poke the belly. You're going to poke the dough, and if it comes back slowly, then that's when you know it's ready to shape. And what we're doing here is we're going to put some rice flour on the board. Rice flour does not have gluten, so it will not add a tough crust to your dough. So you want to use, I use brown rice flour here. So I put it on my board, and I'm getting my Banneton trays or bowls. I'm not sure what you call them, but they're called Banneton. I got mine from Temu. I've not had any issues with them whatsoever. There's a sourdough kit you can actually get. It's probably less than $24, and it comes with everything you need. Those are my Banneton bowls right there. You're going to dust them with the brown rice flour so the dough does not stick. And one's a little larger than the other. And this is just a sifter that I have it in. So they're dusted well enough there. So I'm going to tip my dough out onto the floured surface. You try not to get rid of any of the dough or air that you've had while bulk fermenting. However, if you see any little bubbles, actual bubbles in the bread or in the dough, you'll want to pop them, because they'll just they won't bake well. They'll just bake a huge hole in your bread, and that's not what you want for texture wise. So I'm using my dough scraper in here to get all the dough out. All right, now you're going to spread out the dough to like a 9 by 13 size, and you don't want the top side to here. I shouldn't have done that, but I'm trying for it not to stick to my hands, but I'm spreading it out so it's a 9 by 13 square or rectangle. Just do the best you can. What you're doing is you're trying to develop a little bit of layers here. And I think this is the one I just did regular, just white loaf, a boule, sourdough boule. It may not be. I may be getting the sugar and the cinnamon and the raisins. Looks like that's one. Nope. So again, I'm letting it rest a little bit, and then I'm folding it onto itself to make a loaf. So you're going to pinch, fold, and then you're going to roll this up. You can do it from either side. I started from that side this time. Now I'm keeping the rice flour underneath so it doesn't stick. I'm just going to roll it up. Now we want it to be a circle. There are Banneton Benetton baskets, that's what they're called, baskets, that are more of a rectangle, but my bowls are round. And so what I'm doing now is I'm increasing the surface tension of the bread so that it's able to hold itself, because once you put it in the basket, it's going to start relaxing. So you want to make sure that and you're going to take the floured side and put it down. Now here you're just pinch and knead. All we're doing again is increasing the surface tension to hold it in that shape so it doesn't relax out and go all over. And I'm going to let it sit here for a few minutes, and making sure I have enough flour underneath so it doesn't stick. You can just pull it up, pull the sides up. And I'm going to let it relax a little bit, and because it's not the way I like it yet, I'm going to set it off to the side and let it relax, and the gluten's going to loosen up, and I'll pinch it again. So this is my second loaf here that we're working on. This one's going to be the, I use monk fruit. I don't use sugar. We don't have regular sugar. I do monk fruit, and I'm going to do cinnamon and sugar. I have not found anybody that has noticed the difference between the monk fruit and the regular sugar. And I'm getting into that darn pantry again. I need to organize it a little better. My dry fruits are down at the bottom, and I have to dig through stuff to get them. You can see where now I took that magnet and I put my recipe up there. You can see that up on the left corner. That's what that is. It's my recipe. Okay, that's our monk fruit. I used golden monk fruit in this case. Oh, I'm refilling the brown rice flour. My shaker's empty apparently, but I could not do it, so I had to wait until my nephew came over and he got it off for me. But I'm putting some more flour down, rice flour. I'm tipping this out, using the bench scraper to get it out of the bowl. Sorry guys, I'm sitting outside. It's a beautiful day, and I'm voice-overing this tape. I hope the background noise is not too bad. It's giving me a little hard time here. Finally got it out. Doing the same thing. We're going to make it a rectangle, and I'm using that bench scraper to scrape some of that brown rice flour underneath it, stretching it out. You don't want it sticking to the board. Now this one I'm going to do a little bigger to try to, because I'm going to put stuff in it, so it's easier if there's more surface. And I just go ahead and mix my cinnamon and my sugar together, or monk fruit, and then I just do the raisins separately, I think, here. I prefer the golden raisins, but that's not what I had. So I use the Splenda. Here I used a little bit. I had a little bit of the Splenda, mixed Splenda, and the monk fruit brown sugar. So I mix some of that in with the golden monk fruit. I say it's probably about a half a cup. Quarter cup of the brown sugar, and the rest is the monk fruit. I'm going to throw some cinnamon in there. I like it very cinnamony, so I probably put 2 or 3 tablespoons in there. Measured with my heart. Mix it together so you don't got clumps. And then you're going to start putting it on the bread, or the dough. And I threw the raisins in there. I've done it both ways. It works out either way. I think if you mix the raisins in with the sugar, it doesn't sink in the bread as much, but I don't know. I think I put too much in there, so I'm going to mix it in there. It's kind of like when you make blueberry muffins, you want to put flour on the blueberries so that they don't sink in the batter. It's kind of that whole thought. There, I'm sprinkling it out evenly. I'm going to do the same thing. We're going to fold over onto itself and kind of pinch it in the middle again. And I saved some of the filling to put on the side. Okay. See, I'm pinching it a little more here because I know I've got filling in there, and then I'm going to roll it up, flatten it out there. I just remembered I've got more to put on. The more you put in, the more the chances are that they will pop into the outside of the bread, though. So more is not always better, because sometimes they will burn in, because your oven is so high. So you're rolling it up again, and again we're trying to get that. I have a little more, so I'm going to put some more on there. Fold it in onto itself and pinch it. And then you're going to take it and you're going to roll it. Again, I'm trying to get everything in. The cinnamon or the raisins were falling out as I was trying to put them in. A little more rice flour. Now we're going to roll it onto itself to make it into a bowl, not a loaf pan size. You can take this same, here I'm increasing the surface tension until I see the raisins start popping out, I think. You can do the same recipe and put it in a loaf pan, and it works just fine. See, I'm tensioning. Roll it to yourself to increase the tension, or you can just roll it in a circle, and that works too. I see the cinnamon and the raisins are falling out, so it's about all I can do. There's my banneton. I'm going to flip it over, and that top is going to go into the bottom there. Picking up the raisins, putting them in. That's the disadvantage of overstuffing your bread, because they will burn. Now see, I'm going to let it relax a little bit, and I'm going to pinch it again. I didn't like the way the bottom was coming apart, so here I'm going to pinch it, pull it together. And I was surprised this loaf did not burn, so there you go. You never know. Because when you put it into the pan, those raisins there on top are going to be on the bottom. But again, they didn't burn. I'm going to go ahead and pull that first loaf off, I believe, and pinch it. It's back together. Make sure to rinse off the sugar and cinnamon I have on my hands. And then you're just going to pinch it, kind of like what you do with, pull it together. We're just increasing that tension. It'll hold this shape better. And I'm putting a little more flour on there so it doesn't stick. Now, this is what we call our cold ferment. And that's where you stick the loaves in the refrigerator for 24, you can go 12, 24, 36. I've gone all the way 72, and it's not caused any issues. That's why I sometimes make 2 and I leave 1 and let it ferment for a longer period of time than the others. So now it's just cleanup time. All right, so this has been fermenting for about 24 hours. I think it's actually close to 30, but I remembered it. I'm adjusting my light there. You can see it is fermenting over the sides of the basket, the Banneton basket, which is not a good thing. I've put my Dutch ovens in the oven for preheat up to 250. I don't preheat. I just put the pans in. I don't preheat the oven. Some people preheat it for up to a half an hour, but I don't see it. I've never seen a need for that. So I'm going to tip this out onto my parchment paper. And one of my Bannetons or my Dutch ovens is bigger than the other, so I think this one went in the smaller one. There's my my lamette, I think they're called. It's just a razor, and you'll need to cut a circle, because the perfect sourdough has an ear. They call it the ear, and basically it's will allow it to rise. If you don't give it a cut, they won't rise, and they just look weird, and they'll pop out somewhere and have a big toe or something sticking out of your. They don't bake evenly, in other words. So there's my first one. My temperature for my oven is 450 for 50 minutes, and then I'm pre-baking these, so in other words, I'm going to freeze them, so I don't do the additional 10 minutes with the cover off the Dutch oven. There's my raisin one. I'm going to flip it over. I have some silicone mats too that I use. I find in my Dutch oven, if I just use the silicone mat without the parchment paper, mine tends to have a really tough crust on the bottom. And when I open the oven, you'll see too that I put a pan of water underneath my Dutch ovens to give it a little bit of steam. That's how commercial bakeries have. They spray in water so that, and the steam reacts with the sourdough and makes it rise a little and makes a better crust. So I'm going ahead and putting a little brown rice flour on top, and then I'm going to cut that circle in there. I usually do a circle and then what they call leaf, where you do one straight line and then 3 slats onto the side. Here I'm doing, you got to cut it pretty thin, pretty deep, like at least 1/4 of an inch. And then I'm doing my leaf pattern here. Sometimes I do just an X in the center. Depends on if you have a lot of inclusions in there. Sometimes you don't want that much of an X in there. So here I am putting it back together. It stores inside of itself. So I'm going to load both the breads into the oven now. Man, it's a gorgeous day out. It's been raining for a couple of days straight, so it's nice to actually be able to sit outside and get some fresh air. Oh, so I put about half a cup of ice in the bottom of my Dutch ovens, and that's what I've collected here is the ice that I'm going to put in both the ovens, Dutch ovens. Okay, here we go. We're going to load them. Gotta take my top off, or the top off the Dutch ovens. This is my smaller one. I got both of these at Aldi's. Both of my, so I do about a half a cup of ice in the bottom of my Dutch oven. The parchment paper also helps from it being too watery, and just compared to the silicone mat. You want to try to get your paper not so you don't get creases in your dough. So I'm going to put the top on there. That's our first one. It is discolored both my Dutch ovens. They say that that's just the way what happens. It doesn't do anything to the function. It just doesn't make it pretty. There's my regular loaf. That's my larger Dutch oven. I think one's a 6 and one's an 8 quart. I really need a bigger one, but okay, they're in there, and you see the water dish in there for my steam. They're in there for 50 minutes. Okay, sounds like my timer went off. 50 minutes. Now, no matter what your timer says, you should always check your bread and make sure they are at 200 to 210 is the temperature that bread is done at. So I think that's what I'm doing here as I'm checking the thermometer. I like to, yeah, see, that's pretty, nice and pretty. Now, like I said, I'm going to freeze these, and so I pre-baked them. So in other words, I'm not going to do those that extra 10 minutes. So that one's, I took the bread out, so that one's good. Alarm's going off. There you go. That thing drives me nuts. And then I'm pulling the second one now. If I'm going to do all this work, I do at least 2 at a time. Because like I said, the texture does not deteriorate or anything when you freeze them. What I'll do after I freeze them, I'll go ahead, oh, that looks delicious. I will go ahead and put them in a Glad bag, or let them cool down completely, and then go ahead and put them in a freezer Glad bag. And then when I bring them out, I will bring them out frozen, put them in at a 350 degree oven for 15 to 20 minutes, depending on your temperature inside. See, that brown sugar sticks a little bit, but it was delicious. And it did not burn. You can see it's not burnt there. I'm putting them on a cooling rack here. And I'm sure they were delicious. Like I said, my in-laws got them. That's her favorite bread, is cinnamon raisin. Hey, Ruth. See, they're not all brown and toasty, because that's what they'll get once we pull them out of the freezer and do that second bake. That one could have rose a little bigger, but it was delicious. We did eat that one. My husband loves it with the oil and the spices. In fact, that's what he got me for Mother's Day, was a bread spice oil kit where you can soak the dip the bread in the oils, different flavored oils. It was delicious. I sometimes save my parchment paper here, but I think I ended up throwing this one away because the brown sugar had got on there, and it would probably burn next time I tried to use it. So I'm temping them right now. Again, we're looking for 200 to 210. That's when you know bread's done. Oh, and the other way to tell too is if you tap it and it's hollow, but that can be deceiving sometimes. So I like to always temp. My friend Barbie, she baked, and that's what her problem was. She wasn't bringing it up to a high enough temperature. So that looks good. I think we're gonna call it sourdough. Thanks for watching. There's the loaves. That's the white loaf. And that's the cinnamon raisin that we made. And here is the recipe. Again, I separate the flour into two different